President Obama continuing his gun control push with a town hall and an op-ed in the Times. Now, he's pressuring people in his own party to go along or to face the political consequences. Then Governor Cuomo on a spending spree ahead of the State of the State address, but who's going to pay for all the big projects that he's proposing? And also, as we count down to Iowa, Donald Trump and Ted Cruz still leading the pack. I'm going to talk to a Politico reporter who says those guys inside the room at the top levels of the GOP, they've got shivers going down their spines. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Well, President Obama ratcheting up his plans as it relates to gun control. He's going to, we'll talk and show you some clips from a live town hall meeting they had in CNN last night. And also, we'll share with you what he said in an op-ed in the Times as well on the same issue. Here are some of those highlights from the town hall.
Our position is consistently mischaracterized. And by the way, there's a reason why the NRA is not here. You'd think that they'd be prepared to have a debate with the president.
They haven't been to the White House in 3 years.
We've invited them. We've invited them.
And I understand that background checks aren't necessarily going to stop me from getting a gun, but I also know that they wouldn't have stopped any of the people here in this room from killing.
Why can't your administration see that these restrictions that you're putting to make it harder for me to own a gun or harder for me to take that where I need to be is actually just making my kids and I less safe?
How do we get those with mental illness and criminals? That's the real problem here. How are we going to get them to follow the laws?
Crime is always going to be with us. So I think it's really important for us not to suggest that if we can't solve every crime, we shouldn't try to solve any crimes.
Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad.
I think a lot of people were surprised by that moment.
I was too, actually. It's the only time I've ever seen Secret Service cry on duty. This notion of a conspiracy out there.
But let me just jump in. Is it fair to call it a conspiracy? I mean,
well, yeah.
There's a lot of people really believe this deeply, that they just don't.
No.
They just don't trust you.
I'm sorry, Cooper. Yes, it is fair to call it a conspiracy. What are you saying? Are you suggesting that the notion that we are creating a plot to take everybody's guns away so that we can impose martial law
but there's certainly a lot of people.
Conspiracy? Yes, that is a conspiracy.
Now, the president also got going on the offense in today's Times. In the op-ed, he says in part, quote, "I will not campaign for, vote for, or support any candidate, even in my own party, who does not support common sense gun reform" here. So a lot to digest, and let's bring in our panel. Shelley Mayer. Shelley's a Democratic Assemblywoman representing Yonkers. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Scott Vanderhoff, a 5-term Rockland County executive, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. Thank you, everyone. Scott, start with you. The platform, and I saw a good chunk of it, and I certainly digested more of it after the fact from last night. It wasn't just sycophants that they queued up to do it. You had a cop who questioned him. You had a woman who was a victim of rape who questioned about the safety implications for some of the proposals that he's talking about. And also supporters of people from Chicago, both the pastor as well as someone who lost loved ones to gun violence that were supportive of the president. But nonetheless, I thought a long overdue conversation on the subject. Would have been better if the NRA was there, but something better than nothing, which I think can kind of define the whole context of this. Does more of this, and what he said in the Times, and we'll get into the details of that, but does more of that potentially move this subject further? Or are we so intractable that no amount of talking by no elected official will make any difference?
That's a real tough question. But I will say this, and I'm a critic of the president often. I give him great credit, and I thought he did a very good job. Forgetting the position at the moment, he took on people there who are emotional, who are involved, who felt and took real questions. And let me just say this, as a licensed gun owner myself, I think this hysteria is crazy. I think what he's offered is not that out of line. He's offering several different, it's my opinion, okay? Yeah. Having said that, people don't trust him. And that's what, if you keep listening to, if you watch as much as I watched, the questions really were, can we trust you not to take our guns away? Yeah. And his comment was, well, I'm a constitutional educator. I know the Second Amendment, but it's not playing in America,
No.
and that's really the problem.
And you know what I found striking, though, was, and for the first time, there was a or else to his comments, specifically in the Times. We've heard before where he falls on guns, but to suggest if you do not support the same premise that there can be controls, we can enjoy the right to bear arms, but with limits and with safeguards, forget about not supporting you. I won't campaign, I won't raise money for you, and I will in any way, potentially making without saying it, if there's a primary person that's running against you that supports me, I may be with that person. We didn't hear that 2, 4, 6, let alone 8 years ago.
It's something of a political counterbalance to the kind of thing that the NRA says, where they'll threaten any Republican or anybody who doesn't support their view on gun rights. And I think that's necessary from an internal political standpoint
very
for
different than what he
Democratic
said in the
candidates
past,
out there.
right?
Absolutely. He hasn't really said much about it in the past. He's pushed for laws, but he hasn't really worked on candidates or worked within his own party. So I think that's a political aspect of it. I wish the kind of conversation that we had seen last night is something that the president had engaged in 5 years ago to the day, by the way, which was the Tucson shooting of Gabby Giffords, or after Newtown. You know, rather than the focus that they had, where the president didn't want to get involved because he was such a divisive figure in the debate, now he's willing to get involved, and I think he's humanizing the debate, and he's also, as Scott mentioned, I think he was seeking to bring the debate back from the crazy extremes.
Yeah.
He's not seeking to do anything, incredibly
and
tumultuous.
to that point, Andrew, Larry, if you can bring up, there was a poll specifically asking the public's support or opposition to the executive order on guns here. And if you look at the numbers, they break it out by political affiliation. I think this may surprise some folks because maybe while the first number may not surprise them, you'd figure the Republican number would be underwater, which would be almost the inverse of Democrats at 15%. But instead, a plurality of Republicans support what the president said he would do via executive order, and 2/3 of independents as well. I think there's a misread, Dominic, nationally, at least by some of the talking heads, that this is so intractable, so everybody's in their own camps, this can't work. But when you look at the numbers, look, Scott's a gun owner, right? He doesn't think that people with felony records, people on terror watch lists, people that are clinically diagnosed here with major mental issues, that we shouldn't have background checks to find out, at least at gun shows, that these people shouldn't have guns. The majority of Americans agree with it. I think we in the media misread about the impossibility because we empower the NRA so much, they speak for everybody, when the math says different. I think elected officials and sometimes people that do stuff like we do just assumes that this is a losing battle, move on to the next fight. I've always felt differently, and the numbers pleasantly surprised me.
Well, first I want to say, Richard, I think it's unfair to say that Obama should have dealt with this earlier. He had so much on his plate. He ran on a platform of delivering health care. And, people like to say, oh, he had Congress, the Democrats had Congress, he could have pushed it through. This is a polarizing issue. And if you don't believe it's a polarizing issue, listen to what the county exec just said. Because what Obama is proposing, it's not that drastic. It's not that radical. But the NRA has been so effective that if he says anything, he's anti-gun, he wants to take your gun away.
But you know what, Assemblywoman? While everything that Dominic says is right, I come right back to the number, and I also say, not just every president, every elected official, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. You don't get to pick which issues you always want to deal with when they happen. No president wanted to have Newtown happen on their watch. It happened on his, and he had to deal with it. He chose politically. It was better to let Congress carry this fight here because he would be too polarizing potentially. But for me, and I speak only for myself as a citizen, when I see him talk last night, it reminds me that he can say to someone, wait a minute, I'm not kicking down your door at 2 in.the morning, taking away your guns.
He tried to say that.
But I think there are some
Richard,
people
he tried
that aren't
repeatedly.
so fervently committed one way or the other that they say, oh.
I agree with you, but here there are two things. One is, I agree with Dominic. I don't think he could only do one thing at a time. This is a president who has managed to do more than one thing at a time, whether you agree or disagree. He's tried on this issue. I think you're pointing out something that happened, which is that the NRA created an environment where everyone thinks that you're either here or there. But as the poll points out, there's a big group in the middle that says, okay, reasonable like this, reasonable, modest gun regulation, yes, we want it. And
Okay, but my question to you is this, though.
but I think they made it so that nobody could say.
But this is where I disagree, though. You're right. However, what is his greatest strength? It was as a campaigner, okay? I defy someone to remember somebody who ran a campaign like the one we saw in 08. Not just because he's a black guy and it was history, but because he moved people to volunteer in record numbers and to do everything else. Not just because I think they want to be on the right side of history, but they thought the guy could move mountains, fairly or unfairly. My point is he allowed the other side to define the terms of the debate. When you listen to him speak, whatever your political affiliation is, when he's done with the speech, you don't think he's crazy. And he allowed that vacuum to persist, and he let other people try and fill it for his side. And that's what I do fault him for, that 7 years too late, he's finally making this an issue.
I don't think it's fair today to say he did something extremely important and powerful last night.
Yes.
Now let's all go back and criticize that he didn't do it earlier. No, we should give him credit. He
Okay,
did
what should he
something
do
hard.
next?
He should continue to do the political organizing like he suggested in the New York Times.
Should he? Should he? And this
I
is for
believe he
everybody.
should.
Should he, if I'm a senator from West Virginia, or pick a purple state here, and I'm a Democrat, and I'm worried about keeping my job, and I'm a candidate in Arkansas, I got a chance to win, but I want to tick off the gun lobby. If I don't come out as fervently as the president here and say, yes, we need more background checks, as the president, should I drop the hammer on him? Because that's what he kind of said today in the Times.
I think he.
But it's a hollow threat. No one wants his support. I mean, the guy is underwater. I mean, he's
Not in those
districts.
those districts. They don't want the president. That's number one. The only other thing I want to mention, and I'm sorry, Dominic.
No, go ahead.
It's really important, is the president also did something else in this. He talked about mental health. And that's one of the issues that a lot of Republicans have talked about. He also said we need to do more on the mental health side. So I think he covered a number of, I don't think the political threat is much of
Richard,
anything.
we're engaging in revisionist history. Remember a few midterm elections ago when the Republicans had so effectively demonized Obama that no Democrat wanted him coming in to campaign for them. So if he couldn't even campaign and had to sit out, see, the Supreme Court to a degree saved his presidency by agreeing with him on gay rights and Obamacare and so on. But prior to that, he wasn't this, in political terms, a knight in shining armor. So if he couldn't even campaign with Democrats, how was he going to take lead on guns?
But here's one thing I do think we're missing. At heart, he's a political organizer. He's not running for re-election.
Right.
He is going to say, now is the time to make this as potent a political issue as the NRA does, and he's going to do it in districts where it would make a difference for it to have his support. In the few districts where it may matter, he's going to throw his weight around. And I think that's a valuable and legitimate tool to make this a test of political organizing.
Well, he should have done it earlier. I mean, to Andrew's point, he's not running again. He has nothing to lose. So he could have been the leader he was last night a couple of years ago. He literally could have.
Certainly after Newtown, he made a conscious decision after that first address to go radio silent until the vote happened. And when it failed, he then went out on the steps outside the Capitol and said what he did.
He made a
Okay, why didn't
calculation.
Biden do it? The Republicans love Biden. Why didn't he jump out there?
They're wrapping me. I'd
Okay.
love to keep this one going here. But when we come back here, closer to home, Governor Cuomo, he's talking about spending billions and billions of bucks here on a slew of major projects. We all like him, but the question is, how's the state going to afford it?